Happy Wednesday, folks. Happy Boxing Day for our friends up in Canada. Normally, I'd be heading up to QEW right now to go to the Toronto Marlies game, which they usually do at Scotiabank Arena. It used to be Air Canada Center. But the wonders of AHL TV allow me to actually stay home and avoid the slick roads and be able to watch the Marlies.
There you go.
Got a couple items here that we'll talk about on the pre-show. Peter will be joining us. Eck is vacationing down in Florida, so we may have him later in the week from his balcony in Longboat Key. Okay, Russ, you went to go see Aquaman yesterday. Thumbs up or thumbs down?
2 fins up. It was really good. What I would like to say about Aquaman is it's really taken a nice jump on the graphics end that, DC only seemed to be able to make for certain Batman movies and Wonder Woman, and now it's starting to go across the board. So that's exciting because, look, I think many of us DC first fans, which I am, went and saw a lot of the Marvel movies because they just were so good. And you like those characters anyhow. It's not like I didn't grow up with them or didn't like them. I certainly liked and read some of them. Right. But I gravitated a little bit more towards DC, but their movies had pushed you away for a little while. Now they're not. The story was better. It's long. Look, it's 2.5 hours. But again, I'm okay with it because it's an origin movie. Like, you have to really it's hard to lay out an entire origin of a character and still have good action in the movie. And they did manage to pull it off. Nicole Kidman did a great job in it. It's Jason Momoa is fantastic. It's really, really good. Willem Dafoe's in it. Like, they did a good job of casting. They did a good job with the underwater scenes are really great. Maybe the best we've ever seen in any kind of movie because, other than Waterworld, which was horrible. It's hard
why bring that up?
I know. It's hard to do underwater stuff. Now, The Meg, which I did see this year, did a good job with underwater stuff and actually, made you believe that megala.
Yeah, right. It's the massive shark. I mean,
it's a prehistoric shark. It's a megalodon. A megalodon actually existed, and it really did make you believe it. This one makes you believe that Atlantis really did exist. And Momoa apparently during the movie wore like hip restraints underwater. So like that, you got to be a pretty tough guy to go through all of that. But I do want to say there is a scene where they show it in like a stadium and an arena, Coliseum. And I think it's in Atlantis. I'm not sure where it is. But there was still obstructed view seating. Like, I get it if on land we have obstructed view seating, but really underwater there was? Like, that just maddens me that some people got gypped on that. That's all.
I have to say, though, I'm not as much of a, I mean, I like the Batman movies, but the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, but I'm not as much of a devotee of all the Marvel movies and all the DC movies. I'll watch them if they're on TV. I like them, but I'm not like breaking down the doors to go see them. And I have to say, I saw the preview for Captain Marvel. I was underwhelmed. I like Brie Larson. She's a really good actress. And I think Annette Bening and Jude Law and Samuel L. Jackson are in it. So they're putting, there's a really good cast there. But I was sort of underwhelmed, and you never know when it's a preview. And you almost see a bit of a seed change here because the Avengers Endgame, which is rumored to be like the end of Chris Evans as Captain America and a number of that original cast that have done all these movies like Winter Soldier and Iron Man 1, 2, and 3. I mean, I don't know if Downey is going to come back.
He apparently is. The talk is that he likes doing like these walk-ons so much that's what he'll end up doing on a lot of these movies.
Right, but some of them are tired, and they've done 6 or 7 of these movies, so I think they want to move on in their career. But you almost get a chance. You almost get the inkling of DC maybe taking a jump ahead now because Wonder Woman. Yeah, so
they're definitely going to take some market share. Like when Marvel laid out or Disney laid out their master plan for all the Avengers and everything, it was a good plan, but they never really accounted for DC affecting them, and I think they will. Now, to roll that over, something else that's going to affect Disney. Got an email today from Verizon, for which I'm a customer, and now Disney and Verizon are having negotiation problems because if you remember, Disney acquired Fox's like regional sports network, and now Disney is trying to get Verizon to carry them if you want ABC and ESPN. So they're basically holding those two channels hostage and making them, in essence, pick up the other channels. Now, Verizon said they made what was a fair offer. We have no idea what that is, but this kind of business is where, if this is ESPN's idea of getting the money back from when they used to be like in what I would call Schaefer City, because they were on the pay end of cable, on basic cable, and got all that free money, it's a bad idea. I'll be right back. Jordan's got to go.
Yeah, no problem. And I have to say this, and I'll repeat it so Russ can hear it. I have a lot of problems with Verizon because they're really a heavy advertiser, and if there's commercials out there that are okay, I know that you see commercials repeatedly on TV, especially if you watch the same channels over and over. Like during the Stanley Cup playoffs, hey Peter, we're live. During the Stanley Cup playoffs, you see the Geico commercials over and over. You see other commercials over and over, and after a while, you get annoying. It's very rare that a commercial gets annoying from the go. And Verizon's commercials with the guy who apparently is a Canadian actor, I didn't know that, the guy from the show Silicon Valley, the HBO show Silicon Valley. I want to throw my TV against the friggin' wall every time I see this commercial. And now, on top of seeing them all the time on TV, like on shows that I watch, they're the commercial on the NHL.com for all the goals. So you see this over, and NHL.com, I'm sorry, if you see the commercial once and you're going in and you're looking at different goals, do you have to see the commercial every single friggin' time that you go in to see a particular goal? I mean,
I'll be honest. I don't do that anymore. It annoys me to the point now where I look for it elsewhere, whether it's on Twitter or somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm going to start doing that because it's
just a time sucker.
Yeah, it's freaking annoying. So, yeah, I mean, and Russ, we seem to hear about this battle between like companies, cable companies. Like always in New York, always like at
New York and Philly, because there's millions of subscribers.
Yeah. And then now I'll depart from that and just touch on this quickly, and then we'll start the show. I put out there on Christmas Eve, just because I was pondering what I was gonna, Christmas Eve dinner or what they eat on Christmas Eve is always, normally I would get Chinese food, because some fellow Italian says, "What kind of paisan are you that you're eating Chinese food on Christmas Eve?" Like, dude, I eat Italian food all the time, so Chinese food is sort of a nice diversion. But the place that I get Chinese food from was like backed up an hour and was closing early. And I decided, okay, I'm not going to like wait around in a lobby for an hour on Christmas Eve. I'm going to find something else. My question that I put out there was, what do you usually order for Christmas Eve? And I couldn't believe like the wide like divergence of like one steak and lobster, pasta, Burger King. Somebody said, I couldn't believe that one. But Peter, what did you have for Christmas Eve?
Well, this year was a little smaller. This is our first year being in town for Christmas, but we did in 7 years. But we did a Thai curry with mussels, and then assorted snacks, and then also a Chinese barbecued pork minced up with various vegetables, mushrooms and stuff, and that you roll in lettuce wraps.
Yes.
That's good.
That sounds good.
Oh yeah. Well, that's because my wife's a genius in the kitchen and I'm basically useless.
We did like Mandarin chicken and rice. I didn't even go to a Chinese restaurant this time or get takeout, but I will tell you that a friend of the show, Mark Fischel, who used to be in charge of like the NHL's credentialing, and he's with the NBA now, he actually does the awards with the NBA. He does a great job. He actually found a Chinese restaurant in New York that was closed. That is like impossible.
That's their busiest.
It's impossible.
That's their busiest day of the year.
Actually, Chinese restaurants almost never close historically, no matter even Christmas or not. A good example is one time I was traveling down to Florida for a friend's wedding, and roads were awful. They actually closed 95, so we had to stay in Savannah. And so we got off in Savannah, and luckily I was in the hotel business at that time, so I could get a free room. It was great, right? But we went to eat in the city, and the only place open was a Chinese restaurant. And normally that's what happens because they're family owned, and they usually say, all right, you know what, we live close by, we'll stay open and we'll clean up. Yeah. And to see that in New York, that was a bit shocking.
Well, I like I said, normally I'll get Chinese food. I went back to my roots and decided to get like my favorite pizza place. And I'll tell you, Russ, I have never seen a pizza place more busy in my life. This place has a small parking lot. There was a line. I'd ordered it an hour before. There was a line of people lined up out the door outside. It was like Chick-fil-A. It was that's how busy it was.
It's hard to believe there's more people like you in Buffalo, but there really are.
Oh, but this place is great. I'll give them free advertising.
Listen, I mean, pizza in Buffalo is really good. It's a very underrated part of the city. I don't want to say it's as good as New York City because I think it's not.
They're different. They're different.
It's different, but it is really good. I mean, it's actually if you counted Buffalo as a separate city and don't count, it as part of like New York State.
Yeah,
it would rank in the top 5 for sure.
Yeah, no, but they're different types of pizza. I mean, Chicago pizza, New York pizza, and Buffalo pizza are all 3 different things. But we'll do a pizza show.
And Boston still needs to learn how to do pizza. But anyhow.
Hello, Hockey World. Today is Wednesday, December 26th, 2018.
Happy World Junior Day. And I'm Peter Tessier in Winnipeg.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Lagello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Let's start with the World Junior, which starts today in Vancouver and Victoria. I'm looking forward to watching it. And I have to tip my hat to the NHL Network that will be carrying, from what I see, all of the games. I mean, the only thing,
like all of the games, yes.
Yeah, the only thing I saw was that, like, and obviously their focus is on Team USA. There's an overlap between the USA game. I think one is in Victoria, one is in Vancouver, obviously. Yeah. And they're going to stick with the USA game and probably come in on the Canada-Denmark game in progress.
Yeah, so that's fine. But juniors, this is the first one I'm missing in a while, but I'll be watching, which is great. Back when we started Sportsology in 2000, you couldn't really get much World Junior information even in the States. The internet was fairly new, and even in 2001, it was the case. Even up to 2006 or 7, it got a little better. But then when the NHL Network originally started doing it, it was just USA games. So then I'd have to try and find things elsewhere. And now we are at least at the point where everybody can get them. So it is nice.
Well,
unless you don't have NHL Network, then of course you don't get it.
Yeah, last year was my first World Junior. I went to, I think, 95% of the games, and I'll let people in on a little embarrassing story that Russ is aware of. They had food for the media and for team officials and officials for the different countries. And I walked in, and there was really nobody there taking money. So there was no guard. So I assumed that meant that the food was free for the media and then, like, about halfway through the tournament, then they had somebody there taking money. And I'm like, I had been eating for free, which was something that was supposed to be paid for half the tournament. So
what's embarrassing about that?
Well, no, because
he felt bad. That's all.
Exactly. I didn't know. And when ignorance is bliss when you're getting free food, and the food wasn't bad either. So okay, so let's start. This is the 3rd time in 4 years that the tournament's in Canada. It was Montreal, Toronto, then it was Buffalo, which is basically Canada, and now Vancouver, Victoria this year. Russ, let's start with, because we'll talk about some of the key players and key teams. Let's start with Team Canada. The one thing that I had seen regarding Team Canada was the debate over the goaltender, and they had 3 exhibition games. One was started by DiPietro, one was started by Ian Scott. The third game they split. The best performance was Scott in the second game, but then he didn't play very well, and neither did DiPietro in the third game. And it seems that Tim Hunter is going to go sort of round robin like USA did with Parsons and Wall a couple years ago, and maybe decide about halfway through who the guy is going to be.
That's not all that's up in the air, though. Bob McKenzie put out a weird sort of troubling tweet a little while ago, and it mentioned how Team Canada was using Noah Dobson and Ty Smith on the third pairing because, like, hey, they're 18-year-olds, and that's not what it's not Bob's doing. This is Bob just reporting. So I'm not ripping Bob, and then Jared McIsaac is also a seventh defenseman. He's also at that age group, right. And I thought, wow, Marcus Phillips is starting on this team, and Ian Mitchell is starting on this team, and they're good defensemen, right? But Ty Smith and Noah Dobson, in my mind, are already better. Who cares about the age thing? But clearly Tim Smith does. Now, I'll tell you, Marcus Phillips is a sturdy guy. He's 200 and something pounds.
Yep.
I get that. But in this tournament, I still want the safer guys. And even Josh Brook has the occasional turnover in him. And so I'm really surprised that these guys are going to start in the third pair when Ty Smith, I believe, is one of their best defensemen, period.
Well,
all around.
Peter, I want to get your thoughts on this, but last year, Russ, who was it? Was it Fabro or was it Makar that we thought should be playing?
Makar did not get full playing time.
Yeah, he was. They were really limiting his playing time, and when he did play, he was really impressive.
He was fabulous.
Yeah. So I mean, that seems to be a tendency with Canada in the sense of
overthinking.
You know what? In these kind of tournaments, right? You're getting a coach and a coaching staff to come together, coach a team of players they're not overly familiar with. They're using scouting reports. They're using and we all know coaches have trust issues. They do. So if you're a player who theoretically should be playing and doing more, you've probably done something that makes the coach question his trust of you. And this is how so much of this, because it's a short tournament, it's a short window into it, and you've got to do things that allow the coach to trust you, so you get your usage until things get desperate. This is exactly what happens with Canada. I mean, Lord knows everyone's a coach and a GM here. You go to the TSN page right now. I mean, you have to scroll down a fair ways to find mention of any other sport not named World Junior Hockey.
Right.
And it's just gone into overload. And I think, the amount of stuff that the level of hyperbole that comes with it now, and I fully put this on TSN because it's their only real major property that's national now, other than some football broadcast rights, depending on what you call football, and they hype it up to no ends.
Yep.
I mean, their stories are crazy, and that trickles down into things. It trickles down in the pressure. Then you host it at home in your own
Tim
country.
Murray said there's no pressure, Pete.
No pressure, but it becomes silly. I think it gets a little goofy, and coaches feed into it too. All of a sudden, who knew what Tim Hunter was doing before he was coach of the World Juniors? I had no idea what he was doing.
He was an assistant coach to Ron Wilson in Toronto.
Yeah,
that's where he was. No. Sticking with Canada here for a second, I was surprised by this. Only one player from last year's team is on this year's team. Formanton got hurt, so he was not going to be. He's not available. The only player is Maxime Comtois, and and he had some NHL experience this year with Anaheim. So that's a great change. It's a statement of how deep Canada's well of talent is, but still you would think that there would be more from last year's team than just that.
But again, they're fiddling around the lines, and our friend Bill Meltzer was talking about that. I'm not going to kill him on the lines, but I will say this. Again, I do think Tim Hunter is way overthinking this, and that's what happens a lot of time with Canada. And when they don't win gold, you usually go back and look, and it's usually because of that. It's usually not because of the personnel. So Jack Studnicka was this close to making the Bruins. I mean, I've spoken to people who work for that team, and they really were thinking about putting him on the team. Like he was dead set preseason on making the team. He put a great run together and almost made the team. But on Team Canada, he's a fourth liner. Now, will they play that fourth line like a fourth line? Will they play it just like another line? I don't know, but history tells me they'll probably play it like a fourth line. So now it's sort of like Stanika's fault that he is like really good but really greasy. So he's like the only guy that could throw there of the other, highfalutin top skill guys like Alex Lafreniere who can't play the fourth line.
And there's almost some sort of old world thinking here because they have Cody Glass and Suzuki as their 1-2 centers, and on the third line, Barrett Hayton, who was a high first round pick of the Arizona Coyotes, is playing the middle, and Morgan Frost, who's a natural center, who what did he have? 65 assists in the OHL last year. He's one of the better playmakers.
But he's skinny, Mike. He's skinny.
Yeah, who gives a crap? That's what I mean.
This is what it's boiled down to.
You don't have to be 6'4" to play center anymore. That's the point. So so there are a lot of question marks for Team Canada, and as we all know, it'll be played out. Peter, it'll be played out on TSN and in the media. That's the thing here. Tim Hunter's being conservative because it's safe. He opens himself up for criticism if he does something that isn't conforming to what people think. So that's probably why he's going to opt for the conservative approach. And
he's going to be conservative until he can't afford to be.
Right.
And hopefully that comes quick and they shake it up and they just go all in and make it entertaining.
It's one of these things though where and people should really watch for Alex Lafreniere. He's going to be the first overall pick, I think, next year. Just a great talent, great shoot and release, man. Just so fast.
In 2020.
2020.
Yeah. Well, I mean next year, meaning the year after this year.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I know. We're getting close to the
Right. Yeah, that's
2020. And he's just tremendous. Like he's got a great shot. He, again, is he at the strength he's going to be at in 4 years? No, but he's so fast and everything else that I think he'll remind people of like when a John Tavares was a young player, like that kind of player. I'm not saying he plays like Tavares. I'm not saying that at all. But I think you'll look at him point wise and otherwise and say, I think he's at a similar level to him.
No, let's move on. The Czechs, they lost to the U.S. in the bronze last year. Necas is back, and I think he was just named team captain for.
He was named team captain, yeah.
Now, unless I missed it, because it was still up in the air up until a few days ago when the rosters had to be set. Zadina is not on the team, correct?
No, he's not.
Okay, so that's a big loss for them.
Well, I don't know. Actually, he was supposed to be though.
Okay, yeah, because I know he was playing with Grand Rapids and he was playing pretty well.
I know. No, I thought I saw that he reported. Hold on.
Okay, well, that's the case.
He's got an injury. He's got an injury, so I don't know.
Okay, maybe he's. Well, if it's like Liljegren with the Leafs, they basically said they denied his availability because he had a high ankle sprain. So, if it's something like
apparently Zadina's there and.
Right. So maybe he can play later on in the tournament.
It may be that, or he might be ready just for the tournament.
Right.
Because he had a lower body injury, so it's sort of up in the air. But he is supposed to play. They do have a great team for the Czechs. Like this is finally like a very competitive Czech team. I mean, you got Jakub Lauko, Ostap Safin, Martin Kaut from Colorado. Like this is a strong, fast team. Philip Hedl from the Rangers.
Yep.
Strong. No, sorry. Hedl, the Rangers didn't let Hedl go. What am I saying? Sorry. So, but they didn't allow happen. But it's still a pretty strong team,
right? And if Zadina can play, I mean that 1-2 punch last year in Buffalo of Zadina and Necas was what got them to where they got. So I mean,
the guy you got to watch is Jacob Skarek, one of their goalies. Like they had two pretty good goalies, Lucas Dostal and Jacob Skarek, both really talented goalies, both completely different. I think Skarek's better because he's more of a post-to-post guy, where Dostal once in a while will give up the goal that you don't like. So I could see Skarek being their top guy, but like I said, Lauko, Kaut, if Zadina plays, this could give teams some trouble because I like their speed and I do like the passing and the skill. And Ostap Safin is 6'5", so that's another one. Great power guy here.
Team USA won the bronze last year. Come in with I think a pretty loaded team. Now, think of this: Middlestat, Brady Tkachuk were eligible, but
that's right.
because they're playing so well in the NHL, they are not playing in this tournament. So imagine the U.S. with those two guys and how much better their chances. Their chances are still pretty good. I mean, they have the Hughes brothers.
They're pretty good.
They're pretty good. I mean, I'm not saying they're the favorite because I don't think there is a favorite right now. I mean, I think
I don't think there's a favorite either. I mean, Canada won last year, so you have to say they are just because. But I don't think there's a favorite either. The Hughes brothers, again, this is really the highest level you'll ever see them play together,
right,
unless one of them gets traded someday to the other team, or that's they get drafted together,
or Vancouver lucks out and wins the lottery. Yeah.
They win the lottery, or some sort of happening like that. But the big thing with the Hughes brothers is if they play on the same power play, there's going to be some magic there. I'm pretty sure of it. It won't be Sedin-like, but I think it'll be really good between the passing and the way how smart they are. But Jack Hughes will be one of the best players in the tournament. The whole offense of that team will run through Jack Hughes. He makes players better. I still think Evan Barrett, who plays for Penn State and Chicago draft pick, is maybe the most underrated guy on that team. He's a centerman. He's a local Pennsylvania kid. He really is another one who could really make things happen there, mainly as a playmaker. But he could still pop in a few goals too. But their strength is at the blue line. Keandre Miller is just having a just dynamite year. Like, Keandre Miller is the best Rangers prospect. He is. And that is anybody who's not at the NHL level.
Better than Kravtsov?
I think so.
Wow.
Yeah. Because again, Kravtsov, we have to see what happens when it comes to North America, when they play a tighter game. In a tournament like this, Kravtsov will look great, and we'll get to that. But I do think Miller, I have Miller ranked higher because I think Miller's a year or two from being in the NHL. He's that good, and he literally started playing defense late. He was a forward first, but his puck retrieval, his speed, his strength, they're all really good. But I don't think the U.S. is going to win this tournament. But Matthias Samuelsson, Shell's kid, I'm glad he made the team. I would love to see Miller and Samuelsson together. We'll see if that happens.
Right.
Samuelsson can play any role. He can play an offensive role. He can play the shutdown role. They'll probably put him in the shutdown role. He's very physical. He'll probably put a few guys through the boards and have a few penalties. But you can't underestimate him. That's a team where I look at them and I say, boy, if they had just a little more offense. I mean, I get it. They have Wallstrom's on the team. They have some offense, but not 4 lines worth of elite offense. That's where the blue line is going to come in handy. And the goaltending, people are asking me, is it going to be Caden Primo or Spencer Knight? I think Spencer Knight will go first round in this draft, but he's young, and he had a bad game already in one of the prelims. So I think Caden Primo might be the leader. His last 2 years have been so good. 3 years ago, I was like, I like Caden Primo. I wasn't sure if he had made the jump yet. Last year, I saw that he was making the jump to be a better goalie, and this year now, I think he's a top goalie. 20
of the 23 players on the roster are already drafted. So that's
which is great. I mean, but we've seen that, and that doesn't necessarily make you a winning team either.
No, it doesn't. Russia apparently waited until like the 11th hour to name the entire roster. They waited until the last minute. Clem Kostin, the first round pick of the Blues, was a late ad. And the impression I get here, Russ, from what I looked at about Russia, they leaned heavily towards the kids that were playing in Russia, and any Russians that were playing in North America, they shied away from. One guy that obviously because the Leaf draft pick, the SDA, the kid who plays for Peterborough, he's playing very well. He's scoring. He's a really quick, creative player. They opted for guys in either the KHL or the MHL and their own prospects on their own home turf, and not the guys who came over to North America. I think that's a sort of a subtle message.
It is a subtle message, and they've been doing that for a while now. You have to be overwhelmingly good, like a Svechnikov, to sort of get away with that. Otherwise, you do get the slap on the wrist. Players for Russia, like obviously Kravtsov is one to watch. He's really skilled. He's big. He's fast. He's great on the power play. He's got a great shot. He can make a lot of things happen out there. He should be their best player. He should be. Clem Kostin in the crease is an absolute beast. I mean, this is a guy who's fast and can pass the puck, but also has great hands. And if he's in the crease, you got to watch out for him. I mean, forgetting about the fact that he's a trained boxer, forget that because there's not that much fighting, but he'll be pushing guys around. Grigory Denisenko, the Florida Panthers pick, this kid can streak up the ice and can really make things happen. He's more of a pass first guy, but he also has a great shot. He's another guy to watch. So it is possible. And look, they have Shechnovich, who's starring in juniors, who I'll tell you, another guy who's really fast, and he could take a lane and fill the lane. If they get 2-on-1s, 3-on-1s, he's deadly. They've got a lot of guys like this. Their goaltending's good. I like Tarasov. He's a good goalie. He's calm, and he's very good technically. They have a really good chance here. I at the end of this, I'll tell you where I picked everybody because I was on a show. I think I said it the other day, but I'll say it again in case people missed it. But I do think that Russia's in the top 4 no matter what.
Okay, just a couple more here. Sweden has to be considered one of the favorites. They lost in the gold medal game to Canada last year. Probably no medal throwing into the crowd this time around. The strength of that team is their defense, even though Rasmus Dahlin, who is the number 1 pick in the draft, is obviously not going to be there, but he would have been eligible. Timothy Liljegren, the Leafs' first-round pick, he was probably their second best defenseman in Buffalo last year. He's unavailable because of a high ankle sprain, but they still have Brandstrom. They still have Boquist. They still have Rasmus Sandin, the Leafs' first-round pick from this year. And, they have a lot of talent up front, Russ. I think Sweden always has to be considered a favorite.
Sweden is one of my favorites. We should mention also Vasily Podkolzin is also a kid on the Russian team who's up for the draft this year, a top 10 guy for sure. Should mention him. I like Ole Eriksson Ek. I think it starts in goal a lot of times, and I like him. He's not going to get mentioned as much as the other guys, but he's one of those guys. He's 6'2", but he plays bigger. Right. You look at him and you swear he's 6'4". Just maybe it's the size of the torso, maybe it's the pads, maybe it's just the way he plays the puck and stands up. But I like everything he does. I like him, his speed, his battle. He's one of those guys, though, that does have to control the 5-hole. That is a way to get to him. So the blue line, you're right. That's where everything is. Even Sands, Lindgren, they still have a great blue line. I mean, those three with Adam Boquist, Erik Brandstrom, Rasmus Sandin, that's fabulous. You could almost run the team with that. Yeah. And they're going to do that. And they're all offensive. They all skate well. They all can play their own end. Boquist not as well as the other two, but they all draw penalties too. Yeah. And Boquist is great at drawing penalties because of puck possession. And Brandstrom's pretty good at it too. And Brandstrom's a little feistier than the other two as well. So that's a great thing to have off the blue line. But again, Philip Hallander, who I was high on, I think he's an underrated guy when the Penguins drafted him. I don't know if he'll play center or wing. He could play both. He'll probably be a top or second line guy for them. He could put the puck in the net. He could also make a great pass. And we saw Isaac Lundestrom this year with the Ducks, and he didn't look out of place. No. And that is a very strong kid in the middle who does have some speed, but he can win faceoffs. So Sweden's got a lot of these things wrapped up as far as and Oscar Bach, right? I mean, Oscar Bach is on that team too. Pretty sure.
Yeah. Peter, I'm not 100% sure. I'll check on his birth date, but I believe Pettersson is still 19. So that's a guy who could have been on this team, but obviously
absolutely. But there's no way he's going anywhere.
No, just like Kachuk and those other guys. They're too good.
Russ, it's interesting listening to you talk about this because the funny thing is on some of the teams there are a ton of NHL draft picks, and I don't do a ton of pre-studying or learning on the World Juniors. I kind of like to just come into it like Christmas and just see what happens and go there. So as you're chatting, I'm looking at the TSN website, and that's that's the mother of all websites for this. This is their big property. It's their hype machine right now.
Right.
You have to scroll to the bottom of their World Junior page to find a listing to the rosters of the teams. When you click on the rosters, you can't even click on a link on a player's name. So I'll give you, I'm just looking at Sweden right now. So here you have Timothy Liljegren, Toronto 2017. There's not a link on any of the stats by line. They just have his age, height, and weight. to talk about it plays on the Marlies. You can't click on anything to find out what he's doing currently.
Wow.
It's an embarrassment.
And that's
for how much effort TSN puts into this tournament
and
to
that's
have
a Leaf
this
draft
level.
pick.
What's that?
That's a Leaf draft pick. So
It's
you would
a
think that
Leaf-
they would have it. Right.
But anyone, when I was thinking, and I was looking at here, and I was looking, oh yeah, David Gustafson of the Jets. I should click on him. Like, I don't know what he's doing. There's nothing there.
That's crazy to me. I mean, I don't want to toot our horn. This is why, like, if fans listen to Hockey Prospect Radio, we probably did a better preview than anybody. But you also can go to Elite Prospects if you join that site or you are a member and listen to replays there. I don't know if they've started to post them yet, but they're going to. This is why we do that show, Peter, because the appetite for it is great, but not everybody has it under control as to information wise.
I mean, I can understand TSN being Canada centric. I get that.
Yeah.
But for people, I mean, honestly, for me, I start boning up for the draft around this time. And last year, I basically went studied like crazy in December. Is starting with the World Junior about the players in the 2018 draft, and in Dallas in June, I had an idea about these guys. Whereas, I mean, they'll list off their top 100 or whatever later in the year, but yeah, great. It's a guy you've never heard about, and you get a one paragraph blurb. I think there's the hunger for knowledge about some of these players. Is something that you can serve throughout the year, and especially at this time. So they should broaden their spectrum in terms of information on not just Canadian players, but on other players as well. One more team, and then we'll move on. Finland, and the reason I want to talk about Finland now, they have some returning players. Tolvanen, who's played in the NHL and the AHL. Jokiharju, who's played with the Blackhawks. So there's some returning players. And I'm butchering his name probably, but I think I am forgiven here because everybody was calling Patrick Laine Patrick Lane at the 2016 World Junior until he corrected it and said it was Laine. Capo Caco, the 17-year-old who's projected to be either 1, 2 in the next draft, probably 2 because
he'll be 2.
But I've not seen him, and I'm sure a lot of scouts have seen him, but this will be my first extended look at him, Russ. I'm anxious to see how he looks. Yeah,
I think he's around 6'1", 185, right in that range. Look, he's a guy who can create fast break opportunities. He's got a lot of skill. Like I said, he's got the speed. He's very smart with and without the puck. So even at his age, he will make a lot of things happen. A lot of the offense will run through him or run around him because he's not a center, but it'll run around him when he's out there. He's going to be a really good scorer. Now, on that team, I don't know what his role is going to be. And the Finns, a lot of times, even if you're a superstar player, sometimes you could be minimalized. Ask Rasmus Dahlin, who got benched. So, you just don't know with them sometimes.
But he got benched as a 16-year-old playing for Sweden rather than.
It didn't matter. I mean, Rasmus Dahlin was good enough then.
Well, the thing is with the Finns and the Swedes, it's a system. You're a product of the system, and you've got to fit into that system. And if you're, even that team with Puljärvi, with Kapanen, with Laine, with Aho, they were playing the Finnish system. You had to conform to what they had. They had incredible individual stars, but I think they had to conform to what they normally play to fit into that system to be able to win. And that it'll be interesting to see how his individual talents shine, because we saw in that World Junior in Helsinki how Laine and how Puljärvi played, and Aho as well.
Yeah, I'll give you a very underrated guy for this one is Jesse Lonen, who is a Montreal Canadiens draft pick. They got him in the second round, and he can make a lot of things happen, and he never gets talked about when there's talk about who the Canadians have in their system, when everybody wants to sort of just dump on them and say, we don't know what they really have anymore. They've traded everybody. Well, it's not true. And he's a guy that buzzes around there out on the ice. He's very fast. So you're going to watch him. You're going to watch him when he sees an open lane. If he's out there with a guy like Kako, or if he's out there with Kupari centering him, Rasmus Kupari for the Kings, you're going to see some great playmaking out there and some really smart play. So those two guys and Alexei Heponiemi, who is a Florida pick, I believe,
Right.
Another really strong, fast, skilled playmaker. What they don't have are a lot of snipers. So if they're smart, Kako will play in a sniper role, and they may even use one of these other guys in a sniper role. But I don't love Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen at times. Yeah. I have this love-hate with him.
I don't know what his stats are, but he was playing for Pete. I think he was playing for Sudbury.
Yeah, I think he's playing well.
Yeah.
But it's just in big games, I've seen the best of him and the worst of him. And I'm not sure which we're going to see here. And that's what but again, he's a big name goalie. So everybody's going to talk about him. He's big. And yeah, he's got a 923 for Sudbury, which is great. I mean, that's.
And remember, this team is not going to have Jesperi Kotkaniemi, who's playing with the Canadians. He's only 18 years old, so he would have been eligible for this tournament as well. So just quickly, Russ, give us what you predict.
Yeah, so I think Sweden is going to win it.
Okay.
I'm going to give Sweden – I'm going to go Canada second, U.S. third, and Russia fourth. Now, in the chat room, I want to give credit to –
I won't make a prediction because I don't want
I want to give credit to somebody. Hold on. I got to find the post. Oh, T2 actually said that, hey, they've got, Hughes, Ryan Paling, and Josh Norris down the middle, which is really good.
Yes.
But it does tail off a little bit compared to like elite guys of like Canada. And that's where I think it's good, but it's not like super good like it has been in the past.
Yeah, so that starts today, and I'll be watching it, and we'll all be watching it, and we'll be talking about it interspersed with the NHL talk. Which there are no games today. The games start, I believe, tomorrow, the 27th. Well, I know the Leafs play on the 28th, and I'm not sure if I think that's tomorrow that the schedule gets going again.
And T2 points out, hey, Tolvanen's a sniper. He is, if they use him that way. I hope they'll use him that way.
Now, Russ, you mentioned something connected with Harper and Machado that we could bring to talk about hockey here, but with no games, go ahead.
Well, what I'm really disliking about their free agency deal is they're artificially waiting till after the new year to have this grandiose announcement and make their decision. Obviously, most teams have an idea which way they're leaning. I mean, Machado has already told friends he likes the Yankees. So this really does kill the hot stove market for baseball. Because while there were some moves early on, Robinson Cano and otherwise, and some signings, it does put a log jam in what's going on. And it never used to happen in baseball.
Right.
I would say, but over the last 10 years, as the salaries rose, there's been a lot more me stuff that goes on in baseball, like the NBA, and it bugs me.
And Peter, it's the exact opposite in hockey, because that 5-day window before July 1st, that gets a lot of. I mean, we used to have to wait. There was a lot of signings on July 1, but we usually have to wait 2 or 3 days for teams to sort of negotiate back and forth with a player. I remember, I think it was Ryan Suter and Parise signed on July 4. Yeah. But now with the 5-day window, a Tavares can happen at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on July 1st. And that seems to be the opposite of what's going on in baseball. You're getting the signings all in the first 2 or 3 days in hockey. And in baseball, it's getting stretched out to the point where these teams are sort of waiting for these players, the prices to come down. And they did that last year. A lot of these guys, they waited until just before spring training or even into spring training to get them on a bargain basement price. You don't see that in the NHL. No,
you don't. And I think one of the things that was really interesting was back after the lockout 2004, 2005, when free agency came into play there with the first salary cap. As the salary cap kept going up, teams were quick to sign players first. They're making offers really fast, and they were signing because the space kept going up. Revenue, it was having huge jumps. Well, now but what happened is there were other contracts that were inherited from from pre-salary cap that were dying. So teams are having a lot of space, not just because of salary cap, but some of these legacy contracts also dying as well. And what we're seeing is the way structures are happening with the NHL is that you have less and less guys available. So this window is a really cool idea because it's sort of idea to prevent tampering, but it gives teams a little bit of an option to try and understand where they should best be putting their time and energy. And the thing is, though, for the NHL, you still see things pretty quick, but there's fewer and fewer guys to go from. Like, I mean,
Right.
I think this year we're actually pretty excited unless some extensions start happening pretty quick because there's some potential for some interest going on with UFA. And baseball just has so much more of it, right?
Yeah.
Like there's just more guys, but different economic model, different variables in play. I mean, I never really understand the whole sort of thing, like the winter meetings and fireworks just erupting with all these signings and stuff. It's just, I don't follow baseball that closely, but certainly the idea of the negotiating window to sort of, I wouldn't even call it a negotiating window. I would call it just the expression of interest window. Where are you at? What are you thinking?
Well, I mean,
it definitely steers teams in other directions and moves things around and keeps things sort of moving in the right way. So you don't, before you basically wait on July 1st and there were guys camping out at agents' offices and stuff, waiting to present contracts and things in person. And, there's less of that now. And I think that's a good thing, but it's changed how it looks and feels.
Well, with the winter meetings, Russ, it used to be that all the trades would happen during that because all the GMs would be there in the same place. And now it seems to be sort of the staging area for trades that are announced later on, like this deal between the Reds and the Dodgers. I mean, that didn't happen during the winter meetings. It happened a week and a half or 2 weeks after the winter meetings.
Yeah, I just remember it would all happen, most of it before Christmas. Like that used to be the schedule. And now it still could have happened that way.
Yeah.
But again, these players and agents, they just are making these grand pitches. Scott Boras has to give out his 150-page report on Bryce Harper. And the funny thing about it is he could still go back to the Nationals. We could find out that nobody else ponied up more than $300 million, and he'll be trotting right back to Washington. That's still a possibility. That's what's maddening about the whole process.
That's a big loss for Boras if that happens, because it basically shows that the ploy, this grand tour that he's doing, it didn't.
No,
work.
but I mean, look, it looks like the Dodgers cleared out enough space that they're gonna buy in and do it. So I think Boras will be safe. But if this does happen in hockey, I'll give him the same criticism because I just think it's bad for the sport. I thought it was bad when LeBron had the TV show. I think it's bad that they're doing this, and now it's literally Hot Stove is dead.
Yeah,
it is 100% dead now until these guys make a decision.
And honestly, it's like this goes across the board for all sports. If you want your fans to be more interested, I think you attract the casual fan and the regular fan more by increasing the possibility of trades, because trades are exciting. Trades draw interest.
Yes.
And I've told the story a million times. When I was a kid in like the late 70s and the early 80s, and believe me, my parents paid through the nose, and I ended up paying them later on. What I would call sports phone in New York City at the trade deadline, because the local radio, they had their like 15-minute sports spot. They wouldn't be covered. It was before sports radio, so it wasn't like or Twitter or anything like that. So the only way that I could find out the trades that were being made was to call sports phone in New York that updated every 15 minutes, and they gave all the trades.
Yeah, it was a big deal, and I would always call. Wow. And I wrote a book with Howie Carpenter. He was one of the main guys on the line.
Don LaGreca, who's one of the Rangers announcers right now, he used to be on there. So it's like, but that was the only conduit. If you wanted to find it out that day,
yeah,
that was the only way. You didn't want to wait until the next day's paper.
I will tell you this: Peter might get a kick out of this. This has nothing to do with this show or anything, but because Peter's Canadian, I think he'll laugh at this. One of the things we used to like to do in that sports phone era was, we were young enough, we would make prank phone calls. One of our favorite prank phone calls would be to the Montreal Expos ticket office, simply because we were speaking in English, they were speaking in French. It was just fun.
Now I wasn't able. I wasn't able. Sacre bleu! I wasn't able to find out specifically, but I believe the trade freeze drops at midnight tonight, because that's the 27th. Right. Yeah. We talked about before the deadline. Eck wrote something about teams leading into the trade freeze who would be making deals before the trade freeze, and none came along. But I mean, I think that was valid because there's some teams that may have been trying to beat that deadline. But now they may have been working over this break to make those deals, and who's going to be the ones, which teams are going to be the ones to sort of jump the gun and make that deal. Now, we've talked about Philly, and we can talk about that again, but yeah. I know Bruce Garriock was reporting in the Ottawa Sun about the Senators maybe doing something rather quickly after the trade freeze drops. And you can see, based on all the financial stuff that's been coming out about Eugene Melnyk,
yeah,
they, you're talking about Craig Anderson, who's making over $4 million. You're talking about, maybe a Cody Ceci, although that might be a deal closer to the deadline. You've got 2 unrestricted free agents pending in Stone and Duchesne, who, maybe those deals wait until closer to the deadline. But you could have a move here where Ottawa says, we can not get rid of, but we can move a player that has salary, bring prospects back. That's the direction we're going, and alleviate our financial situation a little bit more by trading a player who's making a good salary.
Right. And think about it. If that happens, their first trade could be with Philly for Craig Anderson.
Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding.
That would be a likely trade.
It really does fit.
Yeah. And so we can see that pretty quickly. I think Philly has sort of ramped up what they're willing to give in this deal. And I don't know if, Ottawa's dropped demands at all, because for Craig Anderson, if they're really asking for a first-round pick, Philly might balk at it, or they might feel, if we get this goalie, that we're not going to be in the bottom, so we're okay with this, or they might do a lottery protected pick. Those are all options.
Well, okay.
Yeah, I mean,
talk about Peter. Talk about the goaltender market, because we've heard for a couple weeks that the request from Detroit, from Kenny Holland regarding Jimmy Howard, who's a pending UFA, is a first-round pick, and Anderson has another year. So if I was going to give up a first-round pick, it would be for Anderson, even though Anderson has been, I think he's the leader in shots faced this year. I would rather trade, if I was going to trade a first-round pick for a goaltender, and I thought that was the last piece to get me, at least in the playoff race, like Philadelphia apparently thinks, which I think they're delusional, but if they want to give up a first-round pick, I would rather give it up for Anderson than give it up for Jimmy Howard.
Yeah.
Peter seems thrilled at either one, really.
One thing about the thing I don't like about trading Anderson is that it makes the Senators worse. That just means it just Colorado's getting this big fat draft pick, and I don't like that at all.
Yeah.
The Ottawa mess is such a,
well,
I don't even know how you describe it anymore.
The whole suing and counter suing and everything. It was interesting. Elliot Friedman talked about this in his 31 Thoughts this week, and he basically said, the NHL doesn't seem to be in a panic about the whole situation in Ottawa, that they're on an even
that we know of.
That we know, exactly.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that we know of. They could be losing their minds at the prospect of one owner being sued by the guy who was supposed to be part of the build of the LeBreton Flats for $1 billion, and rumors out there that basically Eugene Melnyk is not solvent, that he may have trouble facing and paying payroll. I mean, this can't be good for the league. I mean, the whole situation in Ottawa is a cluster. That's what it is.
Yep, it totally is, and
it could become unmanageable in the next 3-4 months. It really could, and that's when. And we might start hearing murmurs before the draft.
And Russ, everybody's talking about Eugene selling the team, that he'd be amenable, that he might be amenable to it if he gets a certain amount. Nobody is talking about Quebec City. Nobody.
I know, but that doesn't mean
right. And that's what I'm saying. When it's not being talked about, that's when I start to think there's something there.
Yeah, I think Quebec City's being strangely and quiet, but they also know that, like Eck has talked about, the best way to get a team is to be quiet and wait until it comes away.
You know what? If you're whoever it is, what's the Center Videotron, and their ownership group is Quebec Corps. If you're the CEO of Quebec Corps, or whoever else is in that consortium, and I mean, like you said, it's been so quiet for so long. You're calling up Mark Chipman right now, and you're saying, "What was your playbook?"
Yep.
What was your playbook? How did you deal with this? What were the
And
variables?
Mark Chipman's with the Winnipeg Jets, if people don't know.
Yeah, he's a owner, and he was the one who was sitting in the NHL office with 10 minutes to go before the ruling in Arizona, because they could have had the Coyotes back, and then ended up getting the Thrashers. He went to that play. Whatever his playbook was, he should be selling it to the Quebec consortium, and they need a consortium. Let's be really honest here. They need to have a very interesting pool of investors in there. They don't have a lot of industry. They don't have a lot of anything to really deal with stuff. So it has to be a very interesting sort of makeup. And you almost go back to before the Daryl Cates days in Edmonton, when there were about 21 guys who were owning the Oilers and keeping them afloat.
Right.
And they might need to do the same thing in Quebec City, because they just, they don't have the industry there.
It is bigger than it used to be, and it is a little better of an economy than it used to be.
Yeah.
We'll take a couple questions.
Isn't that true? I mean,
yeah, it is. It is, but
I haven't been there in 4 or 5 years, so I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just the size of the city isn't very big.
Well, we'll take a couple questions in the chat after this, but I just want to say one more thing. The fact is, I think that the thing in favor of Quebec City, if it is Ottawa, is it's a Canada to Canada transfer. It's one thing the NHL probably wouldn't be on board. A lot of the owners would not be on board if it was, say, a Florida or a Carolina moving to a Canadian market. But if it's Ottawa to Quebec City, then you're just maintaining the same amount of Canadian franchises. And if there is still a desire to expand, which I don't think, they're expanding the 32 at Seattle. I don't know if they want to go to 33 or 34. I think you're getting a little thin there. But if they do, they want that $650 to $700 million in expansion fee in U.S. funds.
Yeah.
So, or the equivalent of it in Canadian funds of 750 or whatever it is. So, I think,
but they won't want that if they're taken on an emergency basis. It'll be a completely different deal. You watch.
Yeah, and also the thing is, you gotta factor in that
there won't be an expansion draft. They
Right.
get what they get, and that's it.
And you have to factor in that Ottawa, it is the government capital of Canada, and what that means in terms of, and now the thing is, the building is already built. So if it was something like needing funds from the federal government for the building to be built, I think, that wouldn't happen if they were trying to move Ottawa there, but the building's already built. It's already, done. So all they would need to do is just, and they would stay in the same division. So I think it would be the smoothest of transitions.
It seems like a natural, but we'll see if they make a deal, if Philly makes a deal, or the Penguins. Because again, I do kind of wonder why they had all this scouting going on for the last couple of weeks. Does make me think that, and we know Rutherford doesn't really have any kind of deadlines or timelines for trades. He just makes them when he makes them. I
think the teams that you look for are the teams that we know are, going to be in the huge sweepstakes. So that means LA, Chicago, St. Louis, Pittsburgh needs a defenseman, Philly needs a goaltender, Ottawa, we know they're going through a rebuilding situation. So I think those teams, you're going to see something sooner rather than later. I don't know if it's going to be right away, but I think I wouldn't be surprised if before the end of the year, there's one of those teams makes a move.
All right, so Matt asks us, which goalies are the Flyers more likely to trade for? Again, Anderson is one of them.
We've heard Quick's name mentioned.
Quick's name, that's certainly a guy who's in the mix.
But here's the question, Russ. That's the thing.
I think Jake Allen's probably in the mix.
Yeah, he's short term. But Peter, let me ask you this. Philadelphia, I think, is looking for a bridge goaltender to Carter Hart.
Yeah.
Jonathan Quick, in my mind, is not a bridge to Carter Hart. He's an impediment because his contract, I think he has 4 more years. He's only 32 years old. Unless he gets hurt again, which is possible, then, you're limiting Carter Hart for probably the next 3 years to be the backup and playing 20 to 25 games.
You sort of wonder if you need a goalie who will play 60% of the games and give Hart 40. And you basically say, and this is tough because you've got other aspects of the organization to consider, players, contracts, direction you're going. So you're sort of the Flyers' problem here is that they have an answer in goal, but the answer isn't a sure thing because nothing's a sure thing. But there is a solution. It's when does that solution arrive, and how does it time with everything else? So in this case, if you could find a goalie and coach, remember we need a coach who's going to buy into this too at some point.
Yeah, but that's not going to happen until next summer.
Right. To say, okay, we're going to get you a guy for 2 years, but Carter Hart's going to be the backup. But Carter Hart could take over number one if it happens. But we want him playing 40% of the games to start, and you're going to handpick those games based on obviously opponent, location, and different variables. And we're going to build him into this. And then maybe it flips to 60% of the games and the other guy becomes a backup. So if you're looking for a kind of a goalie like that, you might want to talk to the Canucks because they have a couple guys who could sort of suit that role, and Nilsson and Markstrom. And with them, and a similar situation though with Demko. But is Demko, Russ, you can answer this, is Demko ready to come in and be the guy in Vancouver as opposed to what Hart's walking into?
Yeah, I think next year Demko could start, yes.
Yeah. So there's a bit of a difference, right? So the Canucks have these guys, and it may not be the answer having a true number one, but your true number one is Hart. So you got to find build the transition plan for him to be that number one.
Again, that's what we think, Peter, but we don't know.
No, that's what we think. I think should be done.
Right. I mean,
but we don't know if they even are looking at it that way.
Right.
But
your analysis is right. You're looking at it as I'm looking at it, that if Hart is the future of that franchise in goal, that you need the transitional goaltender, a guy for 1 or 2 years. My assertion, and Russ has said this, and I know Eck has brought up Quick. Quick is not a quick solution. He's a long-term solution.
Yeah.
And when he's 35, he still wants to be the starting goaltender. You're gonna have a $5.8 million backup. That just spells trouble to me. But anyway, a couple more questions.
It does spell trouble, but we'll see. I mean, again, you don't know. Too Dope wants to know, any idea if Tampa will make a trade? I think they will, but I think it'll be at the deadline. I think it really will be for like another defenseman, and whether they have to trade a Slater Cuckoo to get it.
They only have $1.8 million in cap space the last time I looked on Cap Friendly. So more than likely they're, if they want to keep the team that they have right now, they're limited in terms of I think it'll be a veteran guy who can plug in on the say 4, 5, 6 spot on their blue line. They like their young guys. They have Cal Foote in Syracuse. Maybe they don't want to rush him, but Cuckoo I think is pretty decent, but they don't seem to want to give him a lot of time.
No.
But I think they'll go out and they'll get themselves a veteran, but it's somebody who won't have a lot of term left and is relatively cheap.
It's true. All right. So Esmir brings the Flyers back into it because he wants to know what the Flyers would be willing to trade. And I do, like I talked about, I do think a first is possible, whether it's lottery protected or conditional, depending on what team gets it and who's going to be rolling with that. And a prospect. Like if it's quick, then you will give up a first of some sort, whether it's next year, this year with conditions. It will be someone like Isaac Ratcliffe, and it will be someone like Robert Haig or even Philippe Myers. That's what it's going to take to get a quick. For Anderson, it might take Ratcliffe and some sort of first, whether it's this year, next year, or if it's not a first, then maybe a second this year. And a second next year, and
they might be willing to take a second in a deal for Anderson because I think they're expecting to get a first for either Duchesne or Stone if they trade him. Yeah,
I mean you got to remember, like Tiemann in the trade deadline got 2 seconds, so if you give like a second in Radcliffe, you might get that. Yeah. That's a possibility. I could see that, and I'd probably be a second this year. I don't think they'll do the next year thing.
Last question.
Last one for John. Any idea what the return would be to X rumor that Habs are interested in Panarin?
Well, I don't think.
We don't think they are, but we have to entertain it because it is possible that if they were to come to some sort of contract agreement with Bob, that they might have to move Panarin in this, even though they're in it. And so if they do,
I'll make a guess. Any Panarin trade is going to include a first-round pick, so I'll say Ryan Poehling and a first-round pick.
I think it could be Poehling and a first. I think it could be Noah Juleson and a first and a second. Like that kind of deal.
And that's a hefty price for a rental because I'm especially with a team that is borderline wild card right now.
Now the second could be next year. They might do it that way.
But that's a heavy price for a rental because I don't think he's signing with Montreal. I think Montreal could throw money at him, Peter. But I think it's it's going to be New York, it's going to be the Islanders, it's going to be Chicago, LA, it's going to be those teams. I don't think it's Montreal. I could be wrong, but I don't think the Panarin is going to La Belle Provence.
Yeah, I mean, this is as good as a guessing game as anything. I think he's in the enviable position of being in such a great driver's seat due to his talent, his age, and what he can do. That it'll be interesting to see who the suitors are who can feel they can fit him in and make him work, but who wants to spend the money and where they are. I mean, he could very well may be happy to go to Montreal if the money's right. We don't even know.
Right.
And Montreal does have a strange sort of background with some Russian players.
We're kind of holding him to task, saying he wants to be like in a coastal area by a beach.
Did he actually say that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, Montreal's on a nice river.
Yeah.
Okay. No offense to the great people of Montreal or the Trois-Rivières, but it's not a beach. Sorry.
Yeah.
No. So he's going to want to go play in Florida. He won't be going to Tampa. Maybe LA, Anaheim, Seattle. No, Seattle. Vancouver could afford him.
San Jose.
I don't think they'd have. Did they have the space to even do that?
Well, remember, if Carlson leaves, that's 6
right. Carlson will probably be gone, so they probably.
Joe Thornton's contract drops off. Maybe he comes back for another year cheaper.
I don't see San Jose for Panarin now. I don't.
No, probably not. But I'm just saying. I mean, that's a possibility. I mean,
he wants to be more of a focal point. That's why I think the Rangers, the Islanders. Yeah. Those are the teams. I think he wants to make a big splash, a focal point. He wants to be the guy with the Lexus and Christmas with the stupid bow on it in the driveway. I got a new car this year. Nobody put a stupid bow on it.
If he wants coastal and stuff, it'd be a great place for him just because it would just drive Mike mental.
Where?
Is Boston.
Boston.
Great. How about Panarin, Bergeron, and Pasternak on one line and Krejci and Marchand on the other.
Yeah, that might be okay.
Oh, good. All right, guys, great show. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll see if there are any trades. We'll talk about some of the World Junior and whatever else is out there. For Peter Tessier, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.